I knew something was wrong the second the key refused to turn. It was a cold Monday morning in late January, the kind that hangs in the air like a breath that never exhales. I had just returned from St. Joseph's Hospital, still in the same jeans I'd been wearing for 2 days, still carrying the same overnight bag I'd packed when Ethan collapsed. The bouquet in my left hand, roses and lilies from his coworkers, had wilted in the back seat of my car overnight. My eyes were swollen, lips cracked from too much crying and too little sleep. I had watched my husband die in the cardiac unit 12 hours earlier. I wasn't ready to face the silence of our house, but I also wasn't ready for what I saw instead. I stepped onto the porch and slid my key into the front door. It jammed. I pulled it out, tried again, nothing. My heart stuttered. I checked the spare, the one hidden behind the loose porch stone. Still no luck. It was like the lock had forgotten me, or worse, rejected me. That's when I noticed the curtains. The white linen ones I'd hemmed myself were gone, replaced by thick velvet panels in a garish floral print I'd never seen before. My stomach dropped. I peered closer through the narrow slit between fabric and wall, squinting against the morning glare. Inside, the living room was cluttered with boxes, cardboard towers where there should have been clean space. A pink velvet pillow sat on my reading chair, a floral teacup on the coffee table, and then I saw her, Diana, my mother-in-law, wearing a navy cardigan and a smile that sent ice crawling down my spine. She was sipping tea, my tea from the wedding china Ethan and I had saved for 3 years to buy. Across from her, casually tossing throw blankets into a basket, was Jocelyn, Ethan's younger sister. They were laughing, moving in, like I didn't exist, like Ethan hadn't died the night before. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time, fists trembling, throat raw. After what felt like forever, the door cracked open. Diana's figure filled the frame, composed and calm, her arms folded tightly across her chest like she'd been preparing for this moment for years. "Rachel," she said, tilting her head, "didn't expect you so soon. What's going on?" My voice shook. "Why can't I open the door?" She leaned against the frame, perfectly poised. "Because, dear, you don't live here anymore." My mouth opened, but no sound came. I blinked at her, sure I'd misheard. "Excuse me." Diana's smile didn't waver. "Ethan paid for this house. My son, not you. There was no prenup, no child, and no real contribution on your part. It's time this house returned to his real family." For a moment, I thought the cold I felt was from the weather, but it wasn't. It was coming from her. "I'm his wife," I whispered. "We bought this house together. I refinanced it when his business failed." "Oh, please!" Diana cut me off, waving a dismissive hand. "You played house while he worked. Now that he's gone, your lease is up." Behind her, Jocelyn appeared with 2 of my serving plates in hand. "You left the side door unlocked when you went to the hospital," she said with a smirk. "We figured you wouldn't mind." I felt my knees wobble, laughed, not out of humor, but the kind of hollow, stunned disbelief that bubbles up when reality snaps too sharply to bear. "What's so funny?" Diana narrowed her eyes. I steadied myself, wiped a tear that I wasn't even sure came from sadness anymore. "You're unpacking pillows and pouring tea in a house you think belongs to you," I said slowly, "but you have no idea what you've just stepped into." The smile on Diana's face faltered, just for a second. It was the only crack I needed. I turned and walked back to my car. My keys were useless now, but I had something better, something she didn't know about yet. And by the time I was done, Diana would wish she'd never touched a single cup in my kitchen. 2 years earlier, almost to the day, I sat at the edge of our front porch, this very porch, watching Ethan run his hands through his hair in frustration. It was January then, too, just colder, darker. His startup had collapsed the week before. The bank had frozen his business accounts. His credit score had tanked. I remember the way he couldn't look at me directly when he said it, They might take the house, Rachel. He wasn't a weak man. But that day, I saw him cracked open in a way I never had before. It was the same house Diana now claimed belonged to the real family. I made a decision the next morning, quietly, without a word to Ethan. I got dressed, drove to the credit union, and started the refinance process. I moved the mortgage into my name using the small nest egg I'd been saving since I left my interior design job 10 years ago. I hadn't told anyone, not Ethan, not my parents, and certainly not Diana. She would have used it as proof that he'd failed as a man. The process took weeks. I picked up a freelance job to start making the payments. Ethan never asked where the mortgage confirmations were going. He was too busy recovering, emotionally and physically. I kept things afloat, fixed the faucet, budgeted the groceries, painted the hallway. I watched our home survive on the strength of my silence. Diana, of course, never knew. She only visited on holidays, never stayed long. She hated the South. Thought Savannah was too humid, too soft, too forgiving. I'd hear her voice echo through the guest room. Ethan, you were meant for more than this floral wallpaper and street jazz. And Ethan would smile that tired smile and whisper to me later in bed, she just doesn't understand peace. I never wanted to confront her. Not then. Not even now. I just wanted space to grieve, to be alone in the only place that still smelled like him. Instead, she changed the locks. I sat in my car outside the house for a long time after that confrontation. The January air seeped into my coat, but I didn't move. I didn't cry. It was like my body didn't even know how to react anymore. How do you process being widowed and homeless on the same day? Eventually, I drove to a motel just off Highway 204, a place that reeked of bleach and mold and something vaguely chemical. I used Ethan's emergency credit card, the only one still active, and rented a room for 3 nights. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at my bag. I hadn't packed clothes, just hospital papers, a book I never opened, and the last voicemail Ethan left me the night before his heart gave out. I played it, once, twice. Then I shut my phone off. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept picturing Diana sitting in my chair, Jocelyn eating off my plates, and the hallway filled with boxes of their things. They hadn't even let the body go cold before staking their claim. The next morning, Tuesday, I woke up to the sound of church bells. St. Francis down the street rang them every hour. I sat up slowly, brushed the knots out of my hair, and stared at the blank motel ceiling. My fingers ached from clenching the sheets all night. My throat burned. And then I did something I never imagined myself doing. I picked up the phone and called the funeral home. "Good morning," a gentle voice answered. "St. Matthew's Memorial, this is Margaret." "Yes," I said, voice steadier than I expected. "This is Rachel Monroe. I need to update the guest list for Ethan Monroe's service." A pause. "Of course, Mrs. Monroe. What changes would you like to make?" I didn't hesitate. Remove Diana Monroe and Jocelyn Monroe from the list. Another pause, this time longer. "Understood." I ended the call before she could ask why. It wasn't spite. It wasn't vengeance. Not yet. It was boundary. The first one I had drawn in over a decade of holding my tongue. And for the first time since Ethan died, I felt something that almost resembled control. Tuesday afternoon, I returned to the house, not through the front, but by circling the block and parking discreetly behind the row of hedges that separated our backyard from the neighbors. I waited, watched. Diana's car wasn't in the driveway. No sign of Jocelyn either. The side door, the one leading from the laundry room to the back porch, had always had a faulty latch. Ethan meant to fix it for months. I knew how to slip it open without a sound. Inside, the house smelled different. Not bad, just foreign. The lavender air fresheners I hated were everywhere. My framed photos had vanished from the hallway walls, replaced by landscape prints I didn't recognize. There was a sharp pang in my chest as I realized someone had rearranged the throw pillows on the couch. Ethan's side of the sofa was empty. No blanket, no coffee mug, no trace. I didn't have time to mourn. I moved quickly. Ethan's office was tucked in the back of the house, between the guest room and the laundry. A small, windowless room filled with wires, books, and the smell of his cologne. Diana hated that space. She called it a digital junkyard. That's why I figured she wouldn't touch it. I was right. The room was just as he left it, chaotic, overly organized in that way only he understood. Papers stacked into columns, receipts half-sorted, USBs labeled in his neat, all-capital handwriting. I stood in the doorway for a moment, letting the silence settle around me like a second skin. Then I went to work. Top drawer, receipts from a freelance job. Second drawer, business cards, old flash drives, and a sticky note reminding him to cancel a dentist appointment. I rifled through them all, unsure what I was looking for, just chasing a memory or maybe a signature, anything that could tie him, this place, and me back together. And then I saw it, a slim, black folder wedged between two instruction manuals on his desk. Across the top in his unmistakable hand, "Postnup, do not discard." I froze. We never signed a prenup. Not once. We married in our mid-30s, broke but in love, trusting each other implicitly. Ethan joked that paperwork ruined the romance. But a postnup? I opened the folder slowly. Inside were 3 printed pages on legal letterhead, dated 2 weeks after our second anniversary. I scanned for my name, his name, signatures, terms, and there it was under a highlighted clause. In the event of the husband's passing, all jointly owned assets, including real estate, are to be transferred wholly to Rachel Monroe, unless otherwise specified in a last will and testament. There was no will, but this was binding. At the back of the folder, I found a folded sheet of notebook paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, Ethan's casual slant, darker ink than usual. For short lines, "If you're reading this, it means something awful has happened. If Mom tries anything, show this to your lawyer. You know how she is. Keep this safe, Ratch." My breath caught. It was the first time I'd seen his handwriting since the hospital. The curve of the R in my name, the way he still signed just E, like a note passed in class. My knees buckled and I had to sit down. I read the note twice, 3 times. My heart ached with something too complicated to name. Grief, vindication, guilt, maybe even gratitude. Ethan knew. On some level, he knew Diana wouldn't stop. And despite all his flaws, he had tried to protect me the only way he knew how. I tucked the folder into my coat and left the house through the back door, just as I'd come in. That night, back at the motel, I didn't sleep again. But I didn't cry either. Instead, I stayed up rereading the postnup until the words stopped blurring. By sunrise, I had called Angela Flores, my old college roommate turned real estate attorney, and scheduled a meeting. Because now I had the paperwork and just enough anger to use it. Wednesday afternoon arrived gray and listless, the kind of day where even the sun seemed reluctant to show up. I had just returned from my meeting with Angela, who, despite not seeing me in years, had wrapped me in a hug like no time had passed. She didn't ask how I was, just looked me in the eye and said, "We're going to make this right." I was halfway through a bowl of instant soup in the motel kitchenette when I heard it, the sharp knock at the door. 3 quick raps, the kind of knock that carries entitlement. I opened the curtain just enough to see the outline of Diana standing outside, dressed in black like she'd walked straight out of a soap opera. Next to her was a man in a gray suit, square jaw, clipboard in hand, wedding band gleaming. Lawyer. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped outside, coat zipped to the chin, folder in hand. I closed the motel room behind me and met them in the parking lot, where the wind whipped Diana's scarf sideways. "Rachel," she said, smiling thinly, "this is Mr. Langley, my family attorney. We're here to discuss next steps regarding the house." Next steps. I repeated, my voice even. Diana nodded, like this was a real estate negotiation between civil parties and not a home invasion staged during a funeral week. Since Ethan left no will, his estate, including the house, is subject to division among next of kin. As his mother and sister, we have legal rights. I'm his wife, I said, the only legal spouse. Mr. Langley cleared his throat, already uncomfortable. What Mrs. Monroe means is that without a clear testamentary directive, probate law permits certain— I'm so glad you're both here, I interrupted, calm but firm. Saves me a trip to your office. I held up the black folder. Diana's smile faltered. This is a notarized post-nuptial agreement, I said. Signed 3 years ago. 2 witnesses, legal letterhead. It transfers all shared assets to me, the spouse, in the event of Ethan's death. I let the silence sink in. Mr. Langley reached out. May I see that document? No, I said quickly, pulling the folder back. You'll get a copy through official channels. I've already retained counsel. Diana's expression cracked, just slightly. You're bluffing, she hissed. Am I? I asked, stepping back toward my motel door. Because if I'm bluffing, you should feel confident enough to go back to your car and celebrate. But if I'm not, then you've committed trespassing, unlawful entry, and you've tampered with property that doesn't belong to you. Mr. Langley took a step away from her, subtly. You don't get to win this time, Diana said, her voice lower now, venom barely concealed. You were never part of our family. You stole my son from us. I tilted my head. He wasn't a trophy, I replied. He was a man, and I didn't steal him. You pushed him away the second he stopped living by your script. I didn't wait for her to reply. I turned my back and walked inside, locking the door behind me. From the window, I watched them stand in silence for a few seconds before Diana spun around, climbing into the passenger seat like a queen in retreat. The lawyer followed, awkward and flustered. They didn't knock again. That night, I sat on the edge of the motel bed and opened Ethan's letter again. I ran my fingers across the ink, wondering if he ever imagined how fast she'd come for me, how shameless she'd be. Maybe he had. Maybe that's why he wrote it. I didn't sleep much. The adrenaline made rest impossible. My hands kept twitching. My breath came in shallow bursts. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing, and the next move would be mine. By Friday morning, the motel room felt like it had absorbed my grief. The air was thick with damp coffee grounds and unopened envelopes. I was sitting at the small fold-out table, trying to focus on sorting the funeral arrangements again. Music, eulogy, seating plan, when I noticed the envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just slid under the door sometime during the night. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Inside was a neatly typed document from the Chatham County Probate Court. The letterhead was crisp, the ink fresh. My name was printed in bold near the top. Rachel Monroe, respondent. My pulse jumped. To whom it may concern, this court has received a formal petition filed by Mrs. Diana Monroe, mother of the late Ethan Monroe, challenging the validity of the property transfer and postnuptial agreement dated June 5th, 3 years prior. The petitioner alleges that undue influence, mental distress, and coercion may have impacted the decisions of Mr. Monroe in the months preceding his death. I stopped reading. She was accusing me of manipulating him, of controlling him while he was weak, of exploiting the man I loved in order to steal his house. I dropped the letter on the table like it burned my skin. The rage that flooded me was slow and hot like molasses over flame. Not explosive, not even loud, just steady, just final. I picked up my phone and called Angela. I figured you'd call, she said before I could say anything. She's saying I coerced him, I said flatly, that I forced him to sign the postnup. Angela's voice was calm, too calm. That's not new. It's what people do when they don't have legal footing. They sling mud and hope something sticks. She wants to take everything, I whispered. Not just the house. She wants to rewrite who he was. who we were. She wants control, Angela corrected. This isn't about money, Rachel. It never was. I stared at the corner of the ceiling, feeling that cold motel air wrap around my ankles. I want to fight her, I said. Not just stop her. I want to destroy her. Angela paused. Then her tone shifted, steel under velvet. Good. But we do it smart. You don't speak to her. You don't respond. You let me build this like a wall, one brick at a time. We hung up. I stared at the court letter for a long time, then folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it into my suitcase. That afternoon, I received a text message from a number I hadn't seen in over a year. James Harding, Ethan's former business partner. Hey, Rachel. I don't want to get involved, but Diana reached out. She asked about Ethan's mental state during the last few months. Wanted to know if I had emails, medical stuff, anything about confusion or forgetfulness. I didn't say anything, but she mentioned that one investor meeting, remember? He came back pretty out of it. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Of course I remembered that day. 3 months before Ethan died. He'd come home from a client meeting pale and shaken. Said he forgot where he parked. Forgot the name of the guy he'd just met. He blamed it on stress. Insomnia. Too much caffeine. But Diana, she must have gotten wind of it. She was building a case. If she could convince the court that Ethan hadn't been of sound mind, even if it was all circumstantial, she could unravel everything. Undue influence was hard to disprove, especially if it came with whispers with concerned family and unanswered questions. That was the moment I remembered something Ethan said, almost offhand, one night after dinner. I have an appointment at St. Michael's next week, he'd said. Neurology just to rule stuff out. Probably nothing. I hadn't gone with him. He told me not to worry. I scrambled off the bed, yanked open my suitcase, pulled out the folder of documents, and dumped it across the bedspread. I tore through everything, utility bills, mortgage receipts, old birthday cards, even a dentist reminder. Then, tucked inside a pile of unopened mail from 3 months ago, I found it. A sealed envelope from St. Michael's Neurology Clinic. I opened it with shaking fingers. Dear Mr. Monroe, following your recent cognitive assessment, we are pleased to inform you that your results fall within the normal range. No signs of early cognitive decline were detected. I read it 3 times before I finally let out the breath I'd been holding for a week. He had been okay, and now I had proof. Monday morning, 1 week since Ethan died, 5 days since Diana filed the petition, 72 hours since I found the neurologist's letter that would change everything. The courthouse on Montgomery Street was cold even in spring. Steel benches, marble floors, that sterile echo of shoes clicking, paper shuffling, and whispered accusations. Angela met me on the steps, hair in a tight bun, folder in hand, eyes sharp. Ready? She asked softly. I am, I said, and I was. For the first time in days, I stood with both feet grounded. Inside, the courtroom wasn't full, just a scattering of people. Diana in the front row, dressed in funereal black lace, her posture immaculate, a tissue already clutched like a prop. Jocelyn sat beside her, head bowed, the perfect daughter in mourning. On their side, Mr. Langley, the same man with the clipboard from the motel. I didn't look at them. Angela and I sat at the respondents' table. My hands trembled under the surface, but I kept my back straight. I wasn't here to beg. I was here to protect what Ethan and I had built. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver glasses and tired eyes, called the session to order. Mr. Langley went first. His voice was careful, gentle, designed to paint Diana as a concerned mother, not a bitter one. He spoke of Ethan's sudden demise, of unanswered questions, of documents signed during times of emotional vulnerability. He avoided the word coercion, but let it hover in the air like smoke. Diana cried once, right on cue. Angela stood slowly when it was our turn. She didn't perform. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid down the facts like cards in a poker game. The notarized post-nup, the house deed in my name, the mortgage payments made exclusively for my account, and finally the letter from St. Michael's Neurology, signed, dated, sealed. Angela handed the copy to the judge and said one sentence that quieted the entire room. This is dated 3 months before Mr. Monroe's death and confirms his full mental capacity. Mr. Langley stammered, tried to pivot. Even so, Your Honor, we must consider the emotional dynamics. Do you have documentation? The judge asked flatly. Medical records? Testimony from a licensed physician? Any evidence of diminished capacity? He faltered. No, Your Honor. Then I see no grounds, the judge said, already writing. The post-nuptial agreement is legally binding. The deed is in Mrs. Monroe's name. This house legally belongs to her. Case dismissed. Just like that, the gavel came down like thunder in my ears. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just exhaled long, slow and silent. The kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding until you finally let it go. Outside the courthouse, the sky was a deep blue. Birds chirped in the oak trees like nothing had happened at all. I didn't expect her to follow me, but she did. Diana caught up on the courthouse steps, heels clicking like gunshots on stone. You may have won the house, she said, voice like glass, but you'll never erase me. I'm his mother. I turned slowly. You already erased yourself, I said. She blinked. What? You erased yourself the moment you tried to rewrite who he was. The moment you broke into our home, stole his things, lied under oath. Ethan knew who you were, Diana. That's why he wrote the letter. That's why he signed the post-nup. Her face cracked, not much, but enough. I leaned in, and if you come near me again, I won't need a courtroom to protect myself. I've already filed the restraining order. She stepped back. You can't keep me from his funeral, she hissed. I already did, I replied without raising my voice. I called the funeral home the morning after you changed the locks. Your name is off the list. If you show up, they'll escort you out. Her mouth twisted. You vindictive little. No, I said, cutting her off. I'm not vindictive. I'm free. And I walked away, head high, not once looking back. The chapel smelled like lilies and cedar polish. It was Tuesday, exactly 1 week after Ethan's heart gave out. The service had been scheduled for noon, but by 11:15, the pews were already filling. Friends, neighbors, a few of Ethan's old clients. Some had driven in from Atlanta, others from Charleston. Many hadn't seen us in years. I'm so sorry, they whispered as they hugged me. He loved you so much. He always talked about your garden plans. He said you were the only calm he ever knew. I nodded, smiled softly, swallowed words I couldn't afford to speak. Angela arrived just before 11:30 and sat quietly near the front, not as my attorney today, but as a friend. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The musicians tuned quietly in the corner. The minister stood near the altar, flipping through notes. The urn sat on a small table wrapped in blue velvet, Ethan's favorite color. I'd chosen it myself. And then I saw them. 2 silhouettes slipping into the back pew, barely noticeable if you weren't looking. But I was. Diana, Jocelyn, dressed in black, perfectly coordinated, hair pinned, veils subtle but unmistakable, morning clothes, theater costumes, masks. They weren't on the guest list. I'd made sure of that. The funeral home had assured me they would be stopped at the door, but someone must have looked away at the wrong moment. And now, there they were, pretending to belong. I stood frozen for a moment, staring across the chapel. My breath caught. My heart pounded, not from grief but fury. I had buried Ethan once already. I would not let them dig him up for show. Angela turned toward me, slightly. Want me to handle it? She whispered. I shook my head. No, I would do it myself. I walked slowly down the aisle, heels echoing in the sudden silence. Every head turned. The music paused. Even the minister stepped aside, sensing something sacred in motion. When I reached the back, Diana looked up. Her smile was small. Jocelyn's eyes flickered away. "You're not supposed to be here," I said quietly. "We're not leaving," Diana replied, voice low and proud. "I gave birth to him." "Then you should have respected his wishes." "I'm his mother." "And I'm his wife." My tone didn't rise. The only one he chose. She straightened, defiant. "You can't stop me from mourning my own son." "Not mourning," I said. "Performing." She blinked. "I will walk out right now," I added. "And I'll take the minister with me. We'll finish the service at a park, at a parking lot, at a kitchen table, I don't care. But you will not sit here and pretend you didn't try to erase him. You don't get to use his death for dignity you never earned." For a second, no one moved. Then Jocelyn's voice broke the silence. "Mom," she said softly, without meeting anyone's eyes. "Let's go." Diana turned toward her, stunned. "We're not wanted here," Jocelyn added. "Let's stop pretending." She stood, and slowly Diana followed. There was no scene, no screaming, no tug of war, just the sound of two pairs of heels walking away, and the soft click of the chapel door closing behind them. When I turned back toward the altar, the entire room exhaled. I walked slowly to the front. The music resumed. The minister nodded, and with my hand steady, I stood before Ethan's urn and said goodbye. Not surrounded by liars, not interrupted by venom, but wrapped in silence, in truth, and in the love of people who actually knew who he was. And for the first time since he died, I felt peace. The day after the funeral, the house was silent. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the kind that watches you, waits for you to crack. I stood at the kitchen sink in Ethan's old sweatshirt, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I hadn't moved. Outside the window, the garden was bare, just turned soil and the beginnings of what would come later. Maybe, if I could keep going. I turned around slowly, half expecting to see Ethan sitting at the table, humming some off-key song, legs kicked up like he always did. But the chair was empty. The mug was his. The silence was mine. I had survived the funeral, survived court, but I hadn't stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. So when I looked out the front window and saw Diana's car parked across the street, I wasn't surprised. It was early, barely 7 a.m. The engine was off. The windows rolled halfway down. A slow stream of cigarette smoke curled through the air. She sat still, hands resting on the wheel, staring straight ahead. She didn't knock, didn't approach, just watched. I didn't move either. I didn't call Angela. I didn't take a picture for evidence. I just picked up my coffee, walked calmly out onto the front porch, and stood there, barefoot, hair undone, mug in hand. I met her eyes. She flicked her cigarette out the window. The car rumbled to life, and then she drove away. No threats, no shouting, no final word. Just gone. But I knew it wasn't surrender. It was retreat, a reminder, her way of saying I still exist. I went back inside, locked the door, and exhaled. That night I didn't sleep. Not from fear, not anymore, but from something quieter, heavier, like my body still bracing for impact, even when the danger had passed. For 3 days, she didn't come back. I spent them cleaning, sorting Ethan's files, touching every drawer and surface he'd once used. The process was brutal. Each receipt a memory, each pen with his bite mark a tiny cut to the chest. On the third afternoon, I found his old gardening notebook, the one he used to fill with plans, doodles, dreams of a backyard space where things could grow without judgment. He had drawn marigolds, labeled every seed, even taped down a packet with a note for Ratch. "One day when you're ready." I wasn't ready, but I went outside anyway. I dug where he marked, turned the soil with bare hands. planted every seed, watered them gently, sat beside them as the sun went down. And for a moment, I forgot the lawsuits, the accusations, the funeral seating chart. I remembered his hands, his laugh, his stupid gardening hat. And when I went back to the front door that night, I found the envelope. No stamp, no handwriting, just 6 words printed in bold block font on a sheet of plain paper. This house will always be mine. I stared at it for a long time. Then I laughed, not bitterly, not out of rage, just lightly, with something that sounded like release. She had nothing left, no claim, no proof, no presence, just 6 words from a woman who had already been removed from my will, my wedding, my life. I took the paper outside, walked to the garden, dug a small hole in the soil under Ethan's marigold bed, buried the letter deep, covered it with earth. Fertilizer, I thought. Maybe something good would grow from it. I brushed the dirt from my fingers and whispered, "You don't haunt me any more." Then I went inside and made tea, with cinnamon, because Ethan always said grief needed something sweet. Spring came early that year. The air smelled like turned earth and lemon blossoms. The garden outside, once just dark soil and scribbled dreams in Ethan's notebook, was beginning to stir. Shoots pushed through the dirt, small and stubborn. Green things fought their way toward the sun. Every morning, I watched them with coffee in hand, wrapped in Ethan's flannel shirt. No muck-up, no expectations, just breath. I didn't hear from Diana again. Not a letter, not a phone call, not another car parked across the street. Whether it was the restraining order or the garden, or simply the truth finally sinking in, I didn't know. And I didn't care. She was no longer a presence, just a shadow in the rearview mirror, a past tense. The house changed with the season. I painted the guest room a soft sage green, took down the photos she'd replaced, and put up new ones of me and Ethan at the lake, of our dog Max before he passed, of sunsets we'd chased instead of arguments we'd avoided. I cleaned out the office, but left one drawer untouched. His drawer, not as a shrine, just as a promise. Some nights I sat by the window and talked to him aloud, about the garden, about the marigolds, about how somehow I was still here. I didn't expect answers, but sometimes the wind shifted just right and I felt less alone. I also went back to work, not out of desperation, but out of choice. I reopened my interior design business, small at first, one client at a time. A grieving widow who wanted to repaint her kitchen to feel less like his space. A retired couple building a sunroom to grow orchids. A young woman who just left her fiancé and wanted her apartment to feel like hers again. They didn't know my story, but I saw pieces of myself in every one of them. I designed like I was planting, with care, with vision, with a quiet kind of power. One Saturday morning, as I trimmed back the rosemary in the kitchen window, I noticed an envelope had arrived by regular mail. No threats, just a check, a refund from the funeral home. The card inside said, "You handled everything with grace. Ethan would have been proud." No signature, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was Jocelyn's. I tucked the note into the back of Ethan's garden journal. It didn't change the past, didn't fix anything, but it was something, and something was enough. By early summer, the marigolds bloomed in full, a burst of gold and orange, so bright they almost looked like fire. I sat beside them barefoot, dirt under my nails, sun on my cheeks, and I whispered the final thing I needed to say. I didn't win because I took something from you, Diana. I won because I refused to let you take me. The wind rustled through the leaves. The chimes on the porch sang a soft, crooked song, and somewhere inside the air, I could almost hear Ethan laugh. They always say that grief fades with time. It doesn't. It changes. It shifts. It softens at the edges, maybe, but it never disappears. It just folds itself into your routine, into the tea you make in the morning, into the silence between songs on the radio, into the way your hand still reaches for someone who isn't there. Ethan is gone. That is the truth. But so is the woman I used to be. The woman who kept the peace at any cost. Who let her mother-in-law speak over her, push her out, claim what wasn't hers. Who sat at the end of long dinners, smiling through invisible wounds. Who disappeared so someone else could feel seen. That woman died the day Ethan did. And in her place, I planted something else. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just roots. The garden out back is wild now. Not messy, not untamed, just alive. Marigolds and mint, rosemary and lavender. I added a bench near the back fence, beneath the maple tree Ethan once wanted to hang wind chimes from. I sit there some evenings not to cry, but to remember who I've become. It turns out the sweetest revenge isn't courtroom victory. It's the quiet click of a door locking from the inside. It's drinking coffee in your own kitchen without fear. It's breathing deeply in a space that no longer smells like shame. I don't tell people everything that happened. Not always. But when someone asks some widow at church, some woman at the market, whose hands shake while she writes a check, I tell them the truth in pieces. I tell them, you don't have to be polite to someone who erases you. You're not selfish for locking your doors. You don't owe anyone access to your peace. And then I tell them about the garden. How it bloomed from a battlefield. How it feeds me, calms me, holds me. How sometimes something small and beautiful can grow exactly where you thought your world had ended. That's not a metaphor. That's survival. And now, months later, I don't walk like I used to. I don't apologize for taking up space. I don't explain why I changed the locks. I don't flinch when I pass that stretch of road where her car once sat, silent and waiting. Because she's not waiting anymore. She lost. And I'm not angry. I'm just done. This house is mine. This life is mine. This voice, this calm, steady, stubborn voice is finally mine. And I'll never hand it over again. The teacups were still warm. The almond cookies I had baked the night before sat untouched on the porcelain plate. It was 7 p.m., the exact time Thomas usually walked through the door, but this time he wouldn't. I stared at the front door for longer than I cared to admit, almost expecting to hear the sound of his key turning in the lock. But there was only silence, the kind of silence that settles into the bones when something is gone for good. My name is Vivian Carter, and for 15 years I believed I had the kind of marriage people envied. Thomas was calm, accomplished, the kind of man who always made a room feel more grounded the second he entered. He never raised his voice. He was never late. He brought me flowers on Sundays, wore crisp button-downs, and never let me worry about the mortgage. We didn't have children. Life just flowed, as if we were two puzzle pieces that simply clicked. But what I didn't know, what I was about to find out, was that puzzle had missing pieces. And one of them was hidden in a place I had never been allowed to go. Thomas died on a Thursday. They said it was a heart attack. I remember the doctor's face as he said it, kind, rehearsed, detached. Massive myocardial infarction, he said. He went quickly. I nodded like I understood, like it made any difference. But it didn't. Not when you've just lost the only person you thought truly knew you. The funeral was a blur of black clothing, polite condolences, and unfamiliar faces telling me how wonderful my husband had been. I clung to Claire, my best friend since college, who kept handing me water I didn't drink and food I couldn't swallow. It wasn't until my sister Rachel arrived, her perfume too sweet, her hug too long, that something shifted in me. "I'm so sorry, sis," she whispered, her voice just a bit too smooth. Thomas was like a brother to me. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in the way she looked at me, it wasn't grief. Later that evening, as she poured herself a drink in my kitchen, she said, "Hey, I know it's not the time, but Thomas loaned me money. I was hoping to get that settled, now that you're taken care of." I stared at her. "What money?" I asked. She blinked, then smiled like I was being silly. Oh, I guess he never told you. Something inside me twisted. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept walking through our house, touching the furniture like it could tell me something. The bookshelves, the polished floors, the framed wedding photo that suddenly felt like it belonged to strangers. That's when I saw them, Thomas's keys, still sitting on the hallway table. I picked them up and there it was. The key I was never allowed to use. The one shaped differently than the others. The key to his garage. I had asked about it once. Years ago. There's nothing interesting in there, he said, smiling. Just tools. Grease. You wouldn't like it. I didn't press. I never pressed. That was our marriage. Easy, comfortable, and full of quiet spaces I wasn't supposed to enter. But now I had nothing to lose. The next morning, I drove out to the garage. It was in the old industrial district, behind a row of crumbling buildings with rusted roofs and weeds curling through cracked asphalt. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect a man like Thomas to keep anything. But he came here once a week, every Thursday. Like clockwork. I never questioned it. The metal door was heavier than I expected. The key turned with a reluctant groan, and for a moment I stood there, afraid of what I might find on the other side. It smelled like dust and oil. I reached for the light switch, and then I froze. It wasn't a garage. It wasn't tools or boxes or car parts. It was a shrine to a life I never knew existed. I took a slow step inside. The fluorescent lights flickered to life overhead, casting a pale glow over the strangest room I had ever seen. The walls were covered, completely covered, in photographs, news clippings, hand-drawn charts, and travel maps. On one wall, dozens of printed photos were pinned in neat rows like some sort of obsessive collage. And every single one of them had Thomas in it, but not the Thomas the first knew. In these pictures, he wasn't wearing his usual tailored suits or polished demeanor. He looked different, relaxed. Worn jeans, casual shirts, messy hair. His face was softer, his posture less guarded. And in almost every photo, he was standing beside a woman. The same woman. She was beautiful, younger than me by at least 10 years, with dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. They were close, too close. Her hand on his arm. His face turned toward her with a smile I hadn't seen in years. In one photo, they were at the beach. Another in a ski lodge. Then one at a candlelit dinner. There were timestamps handwritten on the back of some of them, 7 years ago, 5, 3, one from just a few months ago. August 2024. That one stopped me cold. Because on that day, I was at home cooking his favorite meal, waiting for him to return from a client meeting. And now I was looking at a photograph of him sitting beside this woman and a man in his early 30s. The three of them were smiling, like a family. There was a name scribbled faintly on the back in Thomas's handwriting. Isabel and Logan. August 2024. My knees buckled. I reached for the metal desk in the center of the room to steady myself. That's when I saw the papers. Files stacked high. Bank transfers, corporate records, letters from overseas firms, tax documents that didn't match anything I knew about his business. And in one folder, a medical report. My eyes scanned the header. Crescent Heart Institute. It was dated less than 2 months ago. I found Thomas's full name printed at the top, followed by a diagnosis I could barely pronounce. Ischemic heart disease. Stage 3. Risk of cardiac arrest. High. He knew. He knew he was dying. He knew. And instead of talking to me, instead of preparing me, instead of even hinting at the truth, he spent his last days building some secret world with another woman, another life, another child? Because that's what the young man in the photo had to be. Their son. My stomach turned. 15 years. 15 years I stood by him. And now, the man I buried wasn't my husband. Not really. He was a stranger. A stranger who had looked me in the eye the night before he died, handed me a velvet box with a sapphire necklace inside, kissed my cheek, and told me, "You're the only one for me." I staggered back toward the door. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, my mind spinning. What was I supposed to do with this? Who even was I now? A widow, yes. But of whom? That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Soft. Hesitant. Like someone didn't want to be heard. I turned around fast, heart slamming against my ribs. And standing in the open doorway was the young man from the photo. Same dark hair. Same sharp jawline. Same intense, unreadable eyes. His voice was calm when he spoke, but my pulse pounded in my ears too loudly to really absorb the words at first. "Vivian Carter," he asked. I didn't answer. "I thought you might come here." "I'm Logan Myers," he said, stepping inside slowly. "Thomas Carter was my father." And just like that, the floor disappeared beneath me. I don't remember what I said first. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just stood there, gripping the edge of the desk like it was the only solid thing left in the world. Logan stepped forward, calm but cautious, like he knew this was fragile territory. I stared at him, not just seeing him, but searching. There was no doubt. His eyes, they were Thomas's. Same intense gaze. Same silence that said more than words ever could. You're really his son." I finally managed to whisper. "Yes," Logan replied without hesitation. "And I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this." "How long did you know about me?" I asked, my voice barely above a breath. "My whole life," he said with no trace of apology. "He didn't tell me much, only that he was married, that you didn't know about me. He kept us very separate. My mother, Isabel, respected that. She never wanted to interfere. But after she passed away last year, things changed." Passed away. So now she was gone, too. Just like Thomas. I sat down in the dusty chair near the desk. My legs couldn't hold me up anymore. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Why today?" Logan reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded document yellowed at the edges. He held it out, and I hesitated before taking it. "It's a draft of a will," he said. "Unfinished. Unofficial. My father gave it to me 2 weeks before he died. He said the official one would go to you, but this was just in case." I unfolded the paper, and there it was, Thomas's handwriting, steady and familiar, looping across the page like it always had on birthday cards and dinner notes. It wasn't notarized, just scribbled lines dividing assets. Mention of Logan. A reference to a company I'd never heard of, Mercury South Holdings. And one more thing, access to remaining documents secured in office vault. Code linked to personal item gifted to V. I froze. Personal item. Gifted to me. The necklace. The sapphire necklace he gave me just 2 nights before he died. That wasn't just a gift. It was a key. I touched my collarbone instinctively, though the necklace wasn't there. I had left it at home, tucked in its box because it felt too heavy to wear. Now it felt even heavier. "What is Mercury South Holdings?" I asked, still scanning the document. Logan took a breath. "One of his private firms. Not public. Not on paper. He used it to move money. Internationally. After my mom died, I started digging. There were transfers I couldn't trace, offshore accounts in my name I never opened. I think he was trying to secure something. For you. For me. For all of us." My mouth went dry. "Why?" "Because he knew time was running out," Logan said quietly. "And because he didn't trust the people he worked with." I looked up. "What people?" Logan's face darkened. He never said names, only that if something happened to him, someone would come looking. For information, for leverage, for what he left behind. I leaned back in the chair, my thoughts racing. A second safe, a company I'd never heard of, a necklace that might hold a code, and a man I had loved for 15 years, who'd built an entire world outside of me. "You're saying there's more," I said. "That the will, the files, the photos, all of it was just the beginning." Logan nodded. "I think he left things behind, not just for us, but to protect us." I stood slowly, my legs still unsteady, and looked around the room one last time. It no longer felt like a shrine. It felt like evidence and a warning. "I need to go home," I said, voice hoarse. "I need that necklace." "Can I come with you?" Logan asked. "If you'll let me." I paused, then nodded, because whether I wanted to or not, this was now our story. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I needed space to think, to breathe. So I called Claire. Within 20 minutes, I was on her couch, hands wrapped around a mug of tea I wasn't drinking, the sapphire necklace sitting on the table between us like a live grenade. Claire didn't ask questions. She never did, not until I was ready. And when I finally told her everything about the garage, the photos, Logan, the will, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just whispered, "I'm so sorry," and reached for my hand. But I wasn't ready to cry. I wasn't ready to collapse. I needed answers. I needed someone to blame. So I drove to Rachel's condo. It was a newer building on the north end of town, one of those luxury developments with underground parking, coded gates, and concierge service. Strange, for someone who had always complained about money. As the elevator climbed, I could feel my anger rising with it. She opened the door barefoot, wearing silk pajamas and a glass of wine in one hand. Her makeup was perfect. Her hair styled like she was expecting company. "Well, if it isn't my grieving sister," she said with a smug smile. "Come to inspect the widow's inheritance." "Cut the crap, Rachel," I snapped. "We need to talk." I pushed past her into the living room, where a framed photograph caught my eye. It was her and Thomas, laughing, toasting champagne. The date, stamped in the corner, made my stomach flip. 5 years ago. What the hell is this? I demanded, pointing at the frame. Rachel sauntered over, taking a long sip of her wine. "Oh, that? A company holiday party. You were too tired to come, remember? Thomas insisted I join him." She said it like it was nothing, like sharing champagne with my husband while I stayed home folding laundry was completely normal. "We always got along so well," she added casually. I turned to face her fully. "How well, exactly?" Her smirk faltered. "I know about Isabel," I said. "I know about Logan. About the garage. The fake company. The will. I know everything. So if there's more, tell me now." Rachel's eyes narrowed. She walked over to her liquor cart, refilled her glass, and said softly, "Fine. You want the truth." She set the glass down and placed a hand on her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she said, "and it's Thomas's." I didn't move. I didn't speak. My brain just shut down. 10 weeks, she continued. I found out a week before he died. He knew. He said he'd take care of everything. He even told me he would leave Isabel soon. I froze. "You were still seeing him after Isabel died." Rachel gave a small shrug. She was never supposed to be permanent. I was always the one who stayed. I felt like I was floating outside my body. The walls, the furniture, the sound of the refrigerator humming, all of it faded into background noise. "You slept with my husband?" I whispered. Rachel shrugged. "Don't act so surprised. You had your perfect little life, your perfect house, your perfect dinners at 7 o'clock. Meanwhile, I was struggling to pay rent, working dead-end jobs, listening to Mom compare us like I was some failed version of you. Then Thomas started showing up, offering help, listening." She looked up at me, eyes suddenly sharp. "You were his routine. I was his escape." The slap came before I realized I'd raised my hand. Rachel's head snapped to the side. Her wine glass shattered on the floor. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just smiled. "Now, there's the real Vivian," she said. "Not the prim, perfect wife. The woman who just found out she's been living a lie." I turned away, breathing hard, hands trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, quieter now. "Because you never would have believed me," she said. "You always thought I was jealous. And maybe I was. But this wasn't about you. This was about me finally getting something for myself." I shook my head. "You didn't just take something. You stole everything." She walked closer, her expression suddenly unreadable. Say what you want, but that baby growing inside me? He or she is your family, whether you like it or not. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to break things, to rewind time, but instead I said, I'll honor what Thomas left in his will. Not for you, for the baby, because they didn't ask for this mess. Rachel blinked. Her voice softened for the first time. You mean that? I don't know what I mean, I whispered, but I know this. I need to leave. I walked toward the door, ignoring the glass crunching under my shoes. My fingers trembled as I grabbed the handle. Behind me, she called out. You think I'm the worst thing Thomas did. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure anymore. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't bear to step into that house with its carefully arranged dinnerware and untouched bed. Instead, I returned to Claire's, clutching the sapphire necklace in my fist like it might burn a hole through my skin. She didn't ask where I'd been. She just opened the door, looked at my face, and said, You need sleep. But I couldn't sleep, not when every room in my mind was crashing inward. The next morning, Logan picked me up in his car. Claire came too, she insisted. You're not going into your husband's secret vault without backup, she said, tossing her coat over her shoulder. Thomas's office was in a high-rise downtown. He'd always called it just a satellite space when I asked somewhere to take private meetings, he'd said. I never once set foot inside, but Logan had a key card. I'm listed as a co-owner, he said, scanning us through security. The receptionist barely glanced up. Thomas had built a life so compartmentalized, it never needed explaining. The elevator ride felt like years. At the 14th floor, Logan led us to a glass-walled office with cold, modern furniture and no trace of warmth. Not a single photo of me. No framed memories. Just sleek surfaces, gray walls, and a subtle scent of cologne I hadn't smelled before. There! Logan pointed to a large, abstract painting mounted behind the desk. The safe's behind that. I reached into my bag and pulled out the necklace. My fingers found the small clasp. I twisted it counterclockwise. Click! A hidden compartment popped open on the back of the sapphire pendant. Inside, a thin metal plate no larger than a SIM card. Numbers were engraved along the edge. Logan took it carefully and slid it into the keypad on the safe. A low beep, then a soft whir. The door opened. Inside were stacks of documents, a sleek black flash drive, a small wooden box, and a single silver key attached to a tag that read, Bank Safe Deposit Federal Trust. Logan pulled out the documents. Contracts, transfers, financial statements. Some of these names, they're international banks. He wasn't just hiding money, he was moving it. Offshore. Fast. I picked up the flash drive, but didn't plug it in. Not yet. Then I opened the small wooden box. It was a ring. A simple gold band with a small diamond. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't mine. Inside the band, an inscription. And always. Not V. Not me. N for Isabel. Jesus, Claire whispered beside me. Logan looked away, jaw tight. He bought her a ring, I said, my voice barely audible. He was going to propose. Or maybe he already had. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't cry, because there in the cold silence of my dead husband's office, I realized the truth I hadn't dared name. He loved her. He might have loved me too in his own way. But her? She got the part of him that was real. The part that smiled in photographs, that vacationed, that laughed. And the rest? The rest was a performance. A polished husband with dinner at 7 o'clock, roses on Sundays, and a safe full of secrets. Then Logan handed me a letter, folded neatly, my name on the front. I unfolded it with shaking hands. Vivian, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry. I never had the courage to tell you the truth. To say out loud what I should have said years ago. I was selfish. I built 2 lives because I couldn't give up either. And in the end, it cost me everything. I loved you. I know that sounds empty now. Maybe it always was. But I did. In the only way I knew how. I wanted you to have peace. To be safe. That's why I left you the papers, the access, the truth. Use them how you see fit. Burn them, bury them, or expose it all. It's your choice now. Forgive me if you can. If not, I understand. Thomas. I stared at the page until the words blurred. Then I passed it to Claire. She read it silently, then handed it to Logan. He didn't say anything. None of us did. Because what was there to say? The man we'd all thought we knew had shattered like glass. And all we could do now was decide what to do with the shards. We left the office in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from the absence of anything left to say. Claire drove. Logan sat beside me, and I stared out the window watching Charleston blur into a palette of autumn gray. My dead husband had lived a life I never touched. Now we were holding the pieces of it in our hands, and we didn't know who else was watching. That night, as I tried to sleep on Claire's pull-out couch, my phone rang. Unknown number. Vivian Carter, a man's voice said. Yes, I answered, already on edge. This is Gordon Blake. I was a business associate of your husband's. My stomach dropped. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do, he said, calm as still water. The documents from the safe. Some of them concern international transfers, accounts I helped set up. I suggest we meet. I'm not meeting anyone. You will, he said, because the other people Thomas worked with, they're not as polite as I am. They don't ask. He hung up. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, heart racing. In the morning, I told Logan. His jaw clenched as he paced the room. He contacted me too, he said. But there's more. Last night, someone else called. He handed me a slip of paper. Victor Crane. He claims he's the original source of the funds Thomas moved. He said if we don't return everything by the end of the week, there will be consequences. I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't need to. Logan pulled out the silver key from the safe. We still have the deposit box, he said. Whatever's inside might help explain who really owns what. But do we really want to open another box? I asked, trying to keep my voice from cracking. What if all it does is make things worse? Claire sat beside me. Then at least you'll know. The not knowing, it's what's killing you. She was right. So we made a plan. First, the bank. Then, if things still didn't make sense, we'd find someone who could tell us the truth. Thomas had to have had a fallback. A contact. Someone who knew what the hell he was involved in. That's when Logan said, there's a name my mother mentioned once. Edward Holloway. Dad's old college friend. She said he was the only one who ever told Thomas the truth, even when he didn't want to hear it. Do you know where he is? I think so, Logan said. Mom had his address in Savannah. She kept it in a box of emergency contacts. So we drove. A 2-hour trip in silence. Rain trailing down the windshield like streaks of memory. Savannah greeted us with oak trees and damp air and the kind of stillness that only old towns seem to carry. Edward lived in a tall brick house covered in ivy, like something pulled from a forgotten novel. He opened the door slowly. You're Vivian, he said without hesitation, and you must be Logan. You knew we'd come? I asked. He nodded. Thomas said, if it all comes apart, they'll find you. He stepped back. Come in. Inside, his house smelled like paper and pipe smoke. Bookshelves lined the walls. A piano sat in the corner, untouched but polished. He motioned for us to sit, then disappeared into another room and returned with a sealed envelope. He left this with me, Edward said. Said it was only to be opened if both of you showed up together. I looked at Logan. He nodded. I opened the envelope. Inside was a short handwritten letter and a second will. This one was different. It named the child Rachel was carrying. It assigned 25% of Thomas's private savings, offshore unspecified, to the child, once they turned 21. I felt the blood drain from my face. He planned for everything, even this. And with that, I realized we were standing at the center of a storm Thomas had built brick by brick. And now it was on us to survive it. I stared at the will again, at the name, unborn child of Rachel Carter, 25%, to be held in trust until age 21. It wasn't the money that stunned me. It was the precision. Thomas had planned this, all of it. Even after death, he was still 3 steps ahead. Why would he name the baby but not Rachel? I asked Edward. Because he trusted the child, Edward said gently, not the mother. Logan shifted in his seat. This changes everything. It means Rachel can't touch that money, not legally. I looked down at the second will again. And if she tries? Edward nodded toward the flash drive. Then you use that. From what Thomas told me, it contains detailed records of every transfer, every partner, every crime they committed to build this thing. If they push you, you push back. Claire exhaled beside me. You have leverage. For the first time since Thomas died, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the woman who'd been lied to, cheated on, and left with broken pieces. I felt like the only one left holding the blueprint. And that was power. Logan leaned forward. Vivian, I think it's time we stop reacting. We need to make a move. Before Gordon or Crane does. I nodded slowly. We go to the bank. We drove back into Charleston before noon. The Federal Trust building sat nestled between a law office and a historic inn. Discreet and unassuming. The kind of place you'd walk by 100 times without noticing, until it mattered. Claire stayed in the car. Just text if it gets weird, she said. And if they don't let you in, cry. Nobody says no to a woman crying at a bank. Logan smiled at that. I didn't. Inside, the vault manager looked at the silver key, checked my ID, and raised an eyebrow. It's been years since anyone accessed this box, he said. It was registered under a corporate shield, Mercury South Holdings. He led us into the basement, past layers of security doors and concrete. The air grew colder, the silence thicker, and then we were alone with the safe deposit box. He handed me gloves. Standard procedure, he said. We'll give you privacy. The door closed behind us. My fingers hovered over the lock. Ready? Logan asked. No, but I did it anyway. The key turned smoothly. The box slid out. Inside wasn't cash. No passports. No burner phones. No stacks of untraceable bills. Just one manila folder and a photograph. The photo was of Thomas, Logan, and Gordon Blake, standing in front of a black SUV, arms crossed, laughing. And behind them, Victor Crane. I stared at the photo for a long time. They weren't just business associates, I said. They were a team. Logan opened the folder. Dozens of signed agreements. Shell company registrations. Payoffs. And one document marked Crane Blackmail Insurance in bold red ink. It wasn't just leverage. It was a loaded gun. Thomas kept proof, I whispered, of everything. And in that moment, I understood. He hadn't just left me a mess. He'd left me a weapon. Now it was my choice who to aim it at. We didn't go home. We went to the lawyer. His name was Marcus Doyle, and he'd represented my father's estate years ago. Straightforward, discreet, and allergic to drama. I told him everything. Almost. Not about the affair. Not about Rachel. Just the parts that mattered legally. The documents, the threats, the offshore accounts. He didn't blink. Do you want to press charges? He asked. No, I said. I want insurance. He nodded. Then we'll copy everything. Digitally. Physically. Store backups in 3 locations. One here. One with you. And one with someone not connected to you. I know just the person, Claire said, smiling grimly. We spent hours scanning files. Thomas had kept meticulous records. Names, dates, wire logs, fake invoices. It wasn't just shady business. It was criminal enterprise. International. And with Thomas gone, they thought the evidence had vanished. They were wrong. By the end of the day, Marcus had drafted a simple letter. I added one line at the bottom in my own handwriting. Try me. VC. We sent it to Gordon Blake's office via courier. He called within 15 minutes. You think you're clever, he hissed into the phone. You're in over your head. No, I replied calmly. You are, because the next call I make is to the IRS. And after that, Interpol. There was a pause, then laughter. All right, he said. What do you want? Nothing, I said. I just want you to stop. No calls. No threats. No late-night warnings. You touch me or anyone I know, and the folder goes public. Every file. Every signature. You don't want that kind of trouble. I already have that kind of trouble, I said. The difference is, I'm not afraid of it anymore. He hung up. 2 hours later, Victor Crane called. His tone was different. Smooth. Polished. Like a man used to charming his way through locked doors. Vivian, he said, like we were old friends. I've heard about your discoveries. I think we're starting off on the wrong foot. There is no foot, I said. Just your signature on a dozen illegal transfers. He laughed softly. All hypothetical, of course. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, I know you think you can handle this, but here's the thing, Mr. Crane. I have no reputation to lose, no company to protect. I have nothing left of the life I knew, and that makes me very, very dangerous. That shut him up. I ended the call. Logan and I sat on Claire's porch that night, the flash drive in his pocket, a copy of the folder buried in the planter box behind us. Paranoid? Maybe. But when you've been lied to by the person you trusted most, paranoia starts to feel like survival. I didn't know he was capable of all this, Logan said quietly. My mom, she always said he was complicated, but I thought she meant sad, not corrupt. He was both, I said, and maybe more. I stared up at the stars, cold and steady above us. We're not done yet, I said. There's one more thing we haven't opened. Logan frowned. What? The flash drive. The flash drive was small, black, unmarked, like it had nothing to say unless you asked the right way. We didn't open it that night, or the next morning. It took me 2 days. 2 days of preparing myself for whatever truth was still waiting. 2 days of rehearsing my reactions, as if practicing would make betrayal feel any less sharp. Logan sat beside me on the couch. Claire brought tea again. No one said a word as I plugged it in. A single folder appeared. For Vivian inside, one video file, dated just 10 days before Thomas's death. My fingers hovered, then clicked. The screen went black, then flickered to life. Thomas, not the one I'd seen in wedding photos or seated across from me at dinner. This Thomas looked hollow, eyes tired, shirt wrinkled, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He leaned forward. Vivian, he said, if you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. Or maybe I ran out of time. He sighed and rubbed his face. There's no easy way to say this, so I'll just say it. You were never the one I needed to hide things from. You were the one I wanted to protect. But I waited too long, and now everything's closing in. He paused. There's someone you need to be careful with. Someone you trust more than you should. My heart slowed. He looked straight into the camera. It's Rachel. The room went still. She wasn't just someone I slipped up with. It wasn't that simple. She planned this. From the beginning. The pregnancy wasn't an accident. The night I told her I couldn't keep doing this, she changed. Said if I left her, she'd go public. With the money, with the shell accounts, with everything I'd buried to keep you safe. He leaned closer. I think she killed Isabel. My mouth went dry. I can't prove it, Thomas said, but the timing was too perfect. Isabel had just packed her bags, told me she booked a one-way flight to Lisbon. Then the car crash. Single vehicle. No witnesses. The brakes failed, they said, but she had the car serviced the day before. He looked into the camera, his voice trembling. Rachel knew she was pregnant. Isabel didn't. That's what changed everything. An accident, they said. No foul play. But Rachel knew she was pregnant, and Isabel didn't. Claire covered her mouth. Logan's fists clenched. I tried to make it right, Thomas said. I moved the money, created backups, made sure that if something happened to me, you would have the power. I'm sorry it took this much damage for me to finally do the right thing. He looked away, then back again. I was weak, but you're not. And if you want to walk away from all of this, do it. Take what's yours and leave them in the dust. But if you decide to fight back, don't do it alone. The screen froze, then cut to black. I sat there, unmoving, for what felt like hours. He knew what Rachel was capable of. He knew what was coming. And still, he tried to control the narrative even in death. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear. But now he'd handed me the truth. And it was time to decide what to do with it. Rachel didn't know I'd seen the video. Not when I invited her to brunch. Not when I hugged her at the door, said how much I missed her, how we should talk like real sisters again. She smiled like a woman who thought she'd won. She wore a pale blue dress that hugged her belly just right. He kicks when I drink orange juice, she said with a laugh, rubbing her hand over the bump. I smiled too, but my eyes didn't. We sat on the porch of Claire's house. Logan stayed inside. Claire poured sweet tea and left us alone. I'm glad you reached out, Rachel said, folding her hands neatly on her lap. I was worried you were angry. Why would I be angry? I asked softly. Because my husband was sleeping with my sister? Or because he left you part of the inheritance? Rachel blinked. That was the first crack. She shifted in her seat. Vivian, this is hard for both of us. Thomas was confused, torn. But he loved you. No, I interrupted. He didn't love me. He pitied me. Rachel flinched. I leaned forward. And he feared you. Her face stilled. I placed the flash drive between us. Rachel's lips parted, just slightly. I know about the accounts, the manipulation. I know he was planning to leave you. And I know about Isabel. She didn't blink, didn't move, just said, You can't prove anything. You're right, I replied. But I don't have to. She frowned. I stood up. Because I'm not going to court. I'm not going to press charges. I'm not going to fight for some half-baked justice system to fix this. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm going to walk away and leave you here with everything you thought you wanted. The money, the child, the lies. Rachel stood up too. You think that scares me? No, I said, but it will. Then I turned and walked inside where Logan was waiting. Later that afternoon, I met with Marcus Doyle again, handed him the flash drive, a signed affidavit, and one instruction. If anything happens to me, it goes to the press. All of it. Then I went home, to the house I once shared with Thomas. It was quiet now. Still, I walked through each room, touching the backs of chairs, the door frames, the cracks in the floorboard we never got around to fixing. I opened the closet, packed one suitcase, left the rest. When I reached the garage, I locked the door behind me. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I wasn't coming back. 1 week later, I boarded a flight to Colorado. Fresh air, new name on the lease, a tiny cottage near the mountains. No secrets, no safes, no more pretending. Just me, Vivian Carter, widow, survivor, not the woman who was lied to, but the one who turned silence into power.